Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video. And in today's video, I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content, and I will try my best to get it out there for you guys. There's been plenty of videos that have come as a result of it so far, and the link will be in the description. Thank you very much. But yeah, let's get straight into this one. This is probably the biggest fight of the year, and you always have that kind of big fight feeling around, these massive main events. The last time I've kind of had this feeling was kind of when it was Fury Usyk type of time, like I said, this true massive fight which has created loads of hype and pretty much is just a fight that sells itself. You really don't need to push it that much. Obviously it's going to get sold well and it's going to get pushed well, but you don't need to, because fans are going to be there ready waiting to tune in just because of the hype in which both these names are, and the hype in which they create. And yeah, I think this is hands down the biggest boxing event of the year. No other fight in boxing currently can live up to the same hype, in my opinion. I mean, if you look at any of the other top names around the division, if you have Bivol Beterbiev 3, that's not going to live up to the same hype. Canelo Benavidez, I don't think would live up to the same hype. There's plenty of fights, even like Fury Joshua, that would be huge for UK fans, but again, it won't have the same kind of feel to it, because this is two of the guys at still the best kind of positions in their career going up against each other and putting it all on the line. Of course, this is being kind of promoted by Dana White and by Sela. I mean, he's done very little promotion in it, Dana White, bar the kind of bare minimum, and has kind of been gifted this event to basically do whatever he wants with. Again, it is interesting to see that he's not really going down much of a promotional route and is kind of just leaving it to, the fans to promote it, Ring Magazine to promote it, the kind of events in which they've done Netflix to promote it and things like that. Dana White isn't really going out there and actually trying to publicly push it himself. His Excellency clearly has big expectations for, Sela, and perhaps the fighters on this card might be also battling it out for contracts with Sela and, big future events. I mean, both Canelo and Crawford don't seem to be up with contract of anybody at the moment. I think Canelo's contract with PBC is now done. I think they had a free fight deal, and then Crawford's, he seems to always have been a free agent, especially in more recent times. And so this is, like I say, alongside with the undercard as well, perhaps the start of something really big with Sela being involved with boxing, or it could, go wrong. Of course, we will have to wait and see. It is kind of the first proper male boxing event on Netflix, and I mean, for sure we'll have a massive fan base watching. I mean, it's free to watch, well, if you have Netflix, and 300 plus million people around the world have Netflix, so again, there's going to be a massive audience there to watch it. Of course, when I say proper, male boxing event, of course they had Katie Taylor Serrano on there not too long ago. That seemed to perform well. But then, of course, they had Jake Paul versus Tyson Fury, which did crazily big numbers. And of course, that was a bit of an exhibition type fight, really. But like I say, that showcased just I think a fringe of the ability in which Netflix and the draw in which Netflix do have. And I'm really interested to see how much this kind of, like I say, draw in which they have will affect this fight, and how well will this sell, both on Netflix, but then at the same time, how will it sell in person? How big can they make this event? Of course, you're going to want to hope that it is fully sold out, fully packed out. I've seen plenty of giveaways for tickets and stuff like that, which certain creators are doing on certain sites on Instagram and stuff like that. But is that showing that maybe the event isn't selling as well? Like I say, I would like to hope not, but like I say, how big can they make this event? I mean, will both fighters have, a big name walking out with them? Of course, last time out, Crawford had Eminem walking out with him. No, that was for the Spence fight, actually. If that was to happen again, that would be an amazingly big thing as well. And again, there's loads of possibilities of things that could happen for this fight to make it as big as possible. And I mean, there could be history made as well, of course. I mean, for both fighters, there is so much on the line. There is legacy for both fighters. When fighters speak about legacy, this is true, cementing legacy for both fighters. And that's why they want it. I mean, of course, it's going to generate a crazy amount of money, but it is going to be that legacy defining fight. For Canelo, it is going to cement himself as perhaps the best super middleweight ever, and also at the same time up there with, he already is up there with one of the best Mexican fighters ever, but perhaps he could be up there with, perhaps being the best Mexican fighter ever. Again, that's maybe a bit of a bold shout, but still, he would definitely have to be in that argument and that debate if he is able to beat Crawford in this fight. And then for Crawford, I mean, he's already in a lot of people's eyes number one pound for pound ranked already, and he's a two-weight undisputed champion, and now he's aiming to be the first three-weight undisputed champion in the four belt era. So again, record breaking stuff is kind of on the line here, and of course it's again another reason as to why this fight is as big as it is. Crawford hasn't been the most active of fighters in more recent years. I mean, consistently he's kind of been just fighting once a year and going a bit more progressively through the weight divisions. At least in his last fight, he went from fighting Spence in the welterweight division, and then he kind of jumped up to fight Madrimov in the super welterweight division last year, and then now he's making this kind of more major jump up where, you can see that he has been in the background putting on weight, and he's in a position now where he's been, taking photos of him now more bulked up and more ready, and he looks good for the weight. Of course, it's going to play a factor, and a lot of people have been, of course, mentioning the weight as a major issue. And, when Crawford first was kind of mentioning this fight, he did agree. When you kind of, if what Crawford's been saying about this fight for a while, and you've been following the kind of build up to it, he kind of first brought it up and mentioned it on the Joe Rogan podcast, and there was a bit of a, I would love for this to happen, this would be a dream thing to happen, but it was kind of seen as a bit of a fantasy fight because he'd have to, like I say, bulk up so much and really create that, that mass and that muscle mass. But now it seems like, of course, it's all come to fruition and now it's the time. Of course, he hasn't fought at this weight division. Of course, Canelo has throughout a long period of his career now, and he's gotten comfortable in this division. And Canelo isn't the biggest guy height-wise, but he is a stocky figure with, big shoulders and a big neck, and, you can see the build in which he does possess. And for him, he has shown that he can, continuously maintain a high output all the way through the fight. Yes, maybe in a couple of fights he has, into the later rounds lost his shape a little bit or lost his reactions a little bit, but, for the most part, it is just a continuous onslaught from Canelo, and he really does use his physical strength and ability. Crawford will have to showcase if he can do that or if he's wanting to do that, because Crawford can't just run around the whole fight trying to move like he's in a lower weight division. He has to probably go toe to toe at certain points, and if he is doing that, is he going to be able to physically handle Canelo? Of course, we will have to wait and see. I don't know if it's going to be a pure just standing toe to toe war. I doubt that, but it might be a little bit of a physical contest at times. For Crawford, like I say, he's coming off a fight against Israel Madrimov where he kind of was expected to be able to outbox him clearly, and he did have a few issues trying to figure out Madrimov, and as there was a few people kind of claiming that the fight should have been or could have even been a draw. Eddie Hearn was keen to say that he maybe have nicked the fight. Of course, he's going to say that with having Madrimov on his side, but it was definitely a much closer fight than which fans expected. And again, that is like the Canelo versus Skull fight, maybe not a good thing. I'm sure His Excellency is not watching both Canelo's last fight and Crawford's last fight and going, "Wow, this is really exciting to excite the fans into this matchup." But nonetheless, it still is an amazing fight. You can't take that away. There's nothing that can take that away. Perhaps, Crawford moving up in weight, maybe showing that he's slowing down a touch. Again, I don't know. Maybe his reactions are slowing a little bit. Again, that's going to be something in which I feel like is going to be answered into the later rounds. If he can keep moving, if he will keep moving, if he'll want to, like I say, keep going on the back foot, keep trying to use his reactions, or if he's going to have problems with that. Again, like I say, referencing the weight. For Canelo, he is also coming off a fight, like I said, which was a close fight and came with his own frustrations and, frustrations for fans as well. In His Excellency's words, a Tom and Jerry fight. And of course, that's not what His Excellency is going to want to see. But, for both fighters, both Canelo and Crawford, this easily and probably will be a chess match. And I don't feel like either of them are going to care about what His Excellency thinks. They're both just going to box however they want to box and, go for the best route to be able to win. With William Skull, he was circling around the ring the entire fight, and Canelo was having trouble slowing him down and kind of landing anything of note. Of course, the numbers in which he landed was very, very low. They were CompuBox, I think, a record low or something like that. It was a clear, just poor fight, to be honest. I mean, it was not, like I say, entertaining for fans at all. And I think when you look at Canelo's last four major fights, there has been a bit of a pattern with his opponents. They kind of, well, bar the Skull fight, which was a bit of an anomaly, but with the ones that, the four before that, where he was having success, you kind of look at the Munguia fight, the Belanga fight, and the Charlo one, maybe the last three then, and you kind of see that pattern of the opponent getting backed up against the ropes, not being used to being there because they've not had to really be there in their career, and then getting knocked down relatively early. I know that Charlo's was a little bit later on, but then just getting beaten up afterwards, and then Canelo was kind of just cruising to victory at that point because, early on he was able to get so much success because the opponent was respecting him and, didn't really have an answer to him. Will Crawford want to stay on the ropes against Canelo? No, and Crawford, he said that he had to hurt Canelo, so he probably will try and plant his feet at times and try and hurt him to push him off a bit and, like I say, to not give him a tremendous amount of respect, but he's not going to just sit on the ropes and wait and try and trade with him. And again, maybe he might have a little bit of an ego thing at times, Crawford, maybe, but I still think the actual boxing ability, if he sticks to his boxing IQ, which is of course immense, then he might be able to have success. Like I say, if Canelo is seen to be slowing down, like I say, just cruising through the rounds a little bit, and especially in the later rounds, like I've mentioned, where he has been seen to maybe slow down a little bit, and again, like I say, lose his shape a bit as well. Comparisons have been made for this fight to when Sugar Ray Leonard moved up to challenge Marvin Hagler. That was a legendary fight as well, and of course, that was in a great era of boxing, but that was Sugar Ray coming from the welterweight division to beat Marvin Hagler, and shout out Sugar Ray after having quite a lot of time off and retiring, I think twice, and then, like I say, the odds were against him and nobody was really suspecting him to win, but then he was able to kind of outbox Marvin Hagler and then was inevitably able to win through kind of making Marvin Hagler a bit tense or a bit hesitant in his own work. Like I say, there are them considerations and them comparisons that have been there between that fight and this fight. Again, we'll have to wait and see if that plays out like that, but it does kind of show, like I've been saying, the height of the event to be able to compare it to such an iconic fight of the past. A lot has been said about Canelo, like I say, possibly slowing down and the amount of fights in which he's had catching up with him a bit. I don't feel like there has been any fight in which he has taken a tremendous amount of damage that has really hurt him. There has been fights where he's gone into a bit of a war at times. You look at the Bivol fight, he took quite a bit of damage. You look at the Golovkin first two fights and he took quite a bit of damage. But again, it's never really been, him being rocked or hurt. He's always shown a great chin. But, he is also the younger fighter coming into this. He is 35 years of age. A lot of people, I feel like, are just kind of saying that he's getting slower, getting older, but not many people are really talking about the fact that Crawford is 37. And, if you're talking about getting slower, getting older, and also the activity, then you would kind of have to say that Crawford is having a bit of a negative with that because, like I say, Crawford's activity, I don't know if it's really down to any fault of his own. Of course, there was a lot of issues for Crawford versus Spence being made. I know there was a lot of back and forth for a long time, but it still did take a while for that fight to be made. He fought David Avanesian in between, a good level of opponent, but not crazily high level of opposition. Before that, he fought Sean Porter, and that does seem like quite a while ago now. And again, like I say, maybe he showed a few vulnerabilities in that Sean Porter matchup. He got caught with a few shots, maybe, wobbled or not rocked, but like I say, a little bit, like I say, wobbled off balance and caught with a few surprise shots, which he didn't really want to be taking in that Porter fight. And again, if he's having them problems with perhaps the power of Porter to an extent, maybe he might have some issues with Canelo's power, again, if he has to go toe-to-toe at any point. And like I say, he is 37 years of age. He said, again, referencing that Joe Rogan podcast, that he's only willing to take the big fights at this point in his career because of how much he's achieved. So, is he looking at this fight as a kind of final big moment in his career? Again, we'll have to wait and see. To speak about both fighters a bit more individually, I mean, it's going to be difficult, and I won't be able to list everything in which they do well because there is such a tremendous amount of things in which they do well because of how good both fighters are. But, I'll try and get through a few key features which may play a bit of a role in this fight. Crawford is able to typically control the pace really well and distance with his subtle kind of step backs. Again, when you reference that Sean Porter matchup, you see when he dropped Sean Porter, it was lovely. He took kind of two subtle step backs. A lot of time you will see a fighter take a step back and then shoot, but he took the first step back, then another one, then he shot, and he got that beautiful knockdown. And again, that's something in which, like I say, he manages so well, catching you rushing forwards, and then he can, like I say, take them necessary subtle step backs to be just out of range to then be able to throw. And you can see the composure under immense amounts of pressure to be able to do that. And again, will he be able to do that to a Canelo who you can kind of assure will be trying to come forwards? Again, will the power be enough to be able to actually rock him or hurt Canelo? I don't know, but it might be enough to be able to just, keep Canelo guessing a bit more. He's got an amazing fight IQ. I mean, both fighters do, and that's obvious. And you can see that Crawford's always assessing. Again, the same with Canelo. He's a very composed Crawford, and he will make you pay, like I say, make you kind of fall short of your work. He's got great body work, and he's got, that body work in which you can kind of see with the jab as well, the way that he'll bring the jab down and up, and the way that he'll find that kind of opening with the jab to still be able to kind of push you back with a jab to the body is something really difficult to do. And again, like I say, Crawford's able to do it really well. He's got great movement, and again, that's something in which is going to have to play a massive factor in this fight. To see him continuously, moving for a lot of the fight is what I think will happen. I think, of course, he's going to have to plant his feet at times, but he is going to have to get out of a few tough positions that Canelo's probably going to try and put him in. And again, it will be heavily reliant on his movement, which has been shown at a high level. His accuracy is amazing, and he's got a really good disrupting jab as well. Like I say, he can mix up the jab to be that power jab, which can go to the body or go to the head. But then he can also have that disrupting jab, which is, like I say, just causing a bit of frustration. He's got great work rate, and he lures you into his counters really well. His counter punching ability is one of his strongest assets, and it's an asset in which, is just really, really good. His hand speed is excellent, and again, will his speed be able to carry up the weights? Knowing when to plant his feet is typically something in which he does really well. He changes levels well. He mixes up his jab, like I say, greatly. He finds openings and gaps for combos to catch opponents off guard. Again, the combinations in which he was able to land on Spence, the way that he was able to find the angles and catch him coming in, and then inevitably just be able to beat him down just through the great combinations in which Spence just didn't really know where they were coming from, didn't know how to be able to counteract them. He's got a great punch variety, and he's able to vary power really well as well. Again, like I've talked about with his jab, the way that he can distribute different types of jabs with different kind of levels of power, he's able to do that with his punches as well. And like I say, he can fight at an in close or at a mid range and vary that power as well. I feel like it's not going to be negatives, it's going to be more kind of vulnerabilities to speak about for this fight for Crawford. He does typically, similar to Canelo again, have to work you out. And Canelo early on when he's working you out doesn't seem to kind of have as many lapses in concentration as to what I've seen with Canelo. Again, referencing that Sean Porter matchup, you could see Sean Porter started quickly and wanted to get things going and get, Crawford rocked a little bit or, put it on him early. And he was able to do that. And Crawford, you could see him playing up a little bit, laughing a bit, smiling a bit, but you could tell that the shots weren't really what he was planning to take, and he didn't really want to be taking it. And of course, within a few rounds, he was able to work him out, and by the, end of the fight, he was able to stop him. But again, it does take a bit of time, and I do feel like when he is working you out, he can have lapses in concentration. Again, referencing the Madrimov fight this time, that was the same kind of problem. He will invite more pressure. I think he will definitely kind of have to deal with fighting on the back foot a lot, and if he is going to get his own way to be able to fight on the front foot at any point, it will be, he'll have to work for it. Does he carry enough power to really, like I say, gain respect? Again, we'll have to wait and see. He's not, he has to make his opponents kind of smother their work, and he's not always able to do that, and he sometimes allows them to be able to work on the inside a bit more than maybe he would want. If he's over eager or allowing his ego to take over, then he can be, like I say, getting a little bit agitated, a little bit, trying to catch him and maybe go into a little bit of a war in certain periods. Again, it's not really something that happens often, but again, if he is, trying to laugh and joke if he gets caught with a shot to try and play it off and then trying to instantly respond back with his own, then he could easily get caught by Canelo setting them traps. If he chooses to fight in the pocket, he can sometimes do that when not necessary. And if he is trying to just stand in the pocket and just try and catch shots, Canelo will probably be able to find some gaps. I don't think should be trading, for the majority of this fight. But then at the same time, he shouldn't be throwing single shots because single shots won't be enough to be able to really, like I say, push Canelo off. So it's very difficult to be able to find that kind of sweet balance. He does get caught when he plants his feet sometimes. Again, against Madrimov early on, he got caught, and he can sometimes throw a little bit lazily early on, like I said as well, and he can be, willing to take if what he's taking doesn't really hurt him. Again, talking about the Porter fight, he took quite a few shots and, like I say, was laughing and stuff, but he was taking them shots and he didn't really mind to take them shots because they weren't really affecting him. But again, of course, it is still scoring on the judges' scorecards. To speak a bit more about Canelo as a fighter, of course, he's got that front foot pressure, and it is expected. That's what all the fans are expecting to see him coming forwards on the front foot, trying to walk down Crawford. He works angles incredibly well and sets great traps on the front foot, which is very difficult to be able to deal with. And again, like I say, fighters never really know where his shots on the front foot are going to land. He beats you down. He's got a very good, high guard in which for the most part, if he maintains that high guard, is where he's able to catch a lot of shots. But again, in more recent fights, that high guard has been dropping a bit. He, I think, works the best in the pocket. Again, it means he can get caught, but he does work the best in the pocket. He's got great head movement. A lot of the time he is able to just get out of range to then capitalize upon it as well, but, leaning back instead of maybe taking that backward step. He works off his feints really well and can hide his power again behind that tight guard that he does use, using the tight guard to be able to go and try and throw little feints to then, like I say, generate the power. He punishes your mistakes, he stalks you down, he's got amazing fight IQ, of course, himself. He's the more aggressive, I think, out of the two, and he closes the distance, very well, always trying to twitch and find his range, and always trying to, like I say, close the distance and edge closer, and he's able to push you back. He's able to set up the backhand that can either go up or can go down. That's something which, again, is a real great asset of Canelo. The way that he can utilize that backhand to be able to, really make fighters hesitant because they really don't know what to do. He can throw that double jab and then he'll throw that backhand, but instead of just, being able to see that backhand coming and being able to know, oh, it's going to land on my head, I need to put my hand here, he will then throw a shot that looks like it's going to come for your head, but then switch it and then land with still the same amount of power to the body. It's a very difficult technique to be able to do, but Canelo has been able to master it. He's also got a great shovel hook as well, which is an alternative weapon of his, which is a really good, left shovel hook in which he throws up, which is again something which could cause any fighter problems and again carries a very good amount of power. He is able to mix up his work really well and mentally breaks you down. I think, of course, he is the more physical out of the two, and you would kind of have to say he is a master of distance himself. And again, he's able to make them adjustments. It's been seen in multiple fights in which he's had to make them adjustments to be able to win. Maybe he didn't make the right adjustments in the Williams School fight to be able to, win and stop him or really kind of hurt his opponent. But, still he was making adjustments throughout plenty of other fights and plenty of times in his career to be able to go on to win. Negatives about him, I think he's not, cutting off the ring as well as what he once was, maybe. That's a little bit of a thing that could be a possibility. Maybe he's getting too used to coasting a bit and not really wanting to cut off the ring as much, or not really seeing it as a necessary thing, because he used to be able to slide that back foot and then be able to cut off the ring really well from doing that, but he just wasn't able to do it against William School. And again, if he is getting used to his opponents just being on the ropes and just sitting there, then he's going to have to really work on not kind of getting into that habit again for this fight. He I don't think, handles constant movement well, and he does chase fighters maybe a little bit, and he does square up himself, and again can be frustrated. You could see some clear frustrations in that fight against, yet again referencing the School fight. He can be made to overextend, and you can kind of counter his jab a bit as well. You've seen fighters, even like John Ryder, who is able to counter the jab at times a bit against Canelo. Fighters who use angles, can cause him problems. So that was something in which Bivol was able to do. He was able to jab, move off, create a new angle, and was able to do that throughout the entirety of the fight. And again, it was very difficult for Canelo to be able to deal with, and he had a lot of problems with that. He does have the vulnerabilities to the southpaw backhand as well. When you think about the Billy Joe Saunders fight, there was a few times in which he got caught with shots from the southpaw backhand there. Again, the Aruslani Lara fight is another example of that. I don't know if he likes the body to head attacks. He can get caught to the body and then, get caught over the top to the head as well. He leads with singles sometimes a bit too much, like I say, gets too comfortable in close. He, like I say, does get frustrated, and he can take time himself to build into the fight, and maybe Crawford might be more willing to start a bit, faster. If he's not allowed to settle into his own rhythm, then he can have, again, frustrations, and that's, again, thinking about the Bivol fight, that's what Bivol was able to do well, and Mayweather as well. He's not, circling off the ropes if he's backed up. He doesn't, like I say, if he does get backed up, he's willing to sit on the ropes and kind of invite you forwards, because it's like an ego type of thing where he's just not really wanting to be in this position. And again, referencing the Bivol fight, that's what happened at points. He can't rush in himself, and I think he does, of course, slow down later on in the fight. I think that has been showcased a bit now. Who do I think is going to win in this major matchup? I do think that Terence Crawford is going to win via majority decision. I think it's going to be a tremendously close fight. I don't think there is going to be either guy who, is really going to lead the battle. I think it is going to be a purely, heavily based chess match, which is going to be very difficult to score. But I think Terence Crawford is going to start a bit quicker. He might get caught with a shot within the first couple of rounds if he is trying to, like I say, start quickly. But I think the speed of hand early on will cause Crawford to have a bit of success whilst Canelo's trying to figure him out. Then Canelo might be able to catch him with a shot and, not rock him, but, get him aware. Then Crawford might go on the back foot, start trying to move around and trying to slip shots and, like I say, trying to be evasive. But then Canelo's going to walk him down, hopefully cut off the ring well, or Crawford's going to plant his feet at certain times, because he's not going to just allow himself to be running around the ring the entire fight, because that's just not who he is as a fighter. That his ego won't allow that. And then Canelo's offensive pressure might be able to land a few decent shots and a bit of work, whilst he's still got that high tight guard and the good feints. Then when it goes into them later rounds, I think if Canelo is slowing down and if Terence Crawford's stamina and work rate can still last up in the heavier weight division and he's not loading up on shots early on in the fight, then he could actually use the weight to his advantage. Then maybe start, trying to land his own shots again if Canelo is becoming a bit vulnerable, maybe even putting a little bit of power into it into the later rounds. And again, I think that's where Terence Crawford will be able to bridge that gap a little bit more, just enough to be able to get a close decision. And then if he goes into fight next, it probably will just be Canelo again, to be honest. I mean, Crawford, like I said, has said that he will only take the big fights, and I feel like Canelo will only take the big fights at this point in his career as well. So this could be a kind of final saga for both fighters. It wouldn't surprise me if it is. So I doubt, that Terence Crawford will want to or will see the purpose in fighting anybody else again, if he beats Canelo. Of course, we will have to wait and see. Moving on, I did just want to speak about another fight on this card. I've done a prediction video which was requested from the Patreon of the Callum Walsh fight, but I did want to speak about Christian Mbili versus Lester Martinez. Of course, this is for the WBC Interim World Super Middleweight title. It's a good matchup in my opinion. I mean, it's not the matchup in which fans were kind of wanting or expecting for Mbili. I mean, I feel like a lot of people were kind of wanting a Munguia, a Berlanga, a Shiraz, one of them big names, Pacheco, but instead, of course, Mbili's trying to wait around to get his opportunity at one of the titles, which he probably will have to wait around a little bit longer for unless it gets ordered and forced by one of the sanctioning bodies. But this is still a really good matchup in my opinion and a really underrated fight. I mean, Mbili, it's about time to see him actually moving up in competition, and I feel like this is definitely a good fight which is going to showcase how he is able to deal with fighting at a higher level. He's finally been able to leave Canada, and now he's actually, like I say, getting the eyes on him on this big stage. And again, referencing that Paul versus Tyson fight, the co-main event, this isn't the co-main event, but the co-main event was Taylor Serrano, and that was the rematch, and that got amazing numbers. I think it was one of the biggest recorded numbers for a women's fight. And I feel like any fight which will be on Netflix, I think this will be on Netflix, will, I believe, sell really well. And so hopefully, he will be able to have the eyes upon him. And maybe they are trying to set up the winner as a possible opponent for, the winner of the main event. We will have to wait and see. Of course, Mbili's been wanting Canelo for a while. Maybe if Canelo wins against Crawford, then he might be going back and, be willing to then try and fight somebody like an Mbili, who's another guy on the come up. And of course, we will have to wait and see. And again, Canelo is probably going to be more likely to take a fight like that than Crawford if Crawford beats Canelo. But still, it is nice to see that they're trying to have these guys who are potential opponents for the main events, battling it out on the undercard. And Mbili is coming off his own destructive performance as he went through Selecki in one round, something in which, of course, fellow top contender Diego Pacheco couldn't do, Daniel Jacobs couldn't do as well, and Demetrius Andrade couldn't do in the first round. Pacheco, it took him 6 rounds, and that wasn't really, I think that was a year before Mbili went and did it to Selecki, so, I feel like that was definitely a breakout, very good knockout, in which really did showcase that he is levels above and should be progressed along. For Martinez, he's somebody who hasn't fought the biggest of names on his resume so far, but does have a big win against Carlos Congora, and that was something in which, was a win that he was able to gather a little bit of attention from, and Pro Box TV were kind of getting behind him. Then last time out, he went and got a nice TKO victory against Joe Sean James as well, which, like I say, was a nice TKO stoppage, which I think he might have been even in the away corner for, I'm not entirely sure, but it did showcase a good level of power. And of course, having that Gongora opponent as a mutual opponent for both of these guys, I think they fought him with 1 year difference as well. I mean, Martinez was able to have a much more convincing performance than what Mbili did. Mbili still won kind of 7-3 in that fight with, in the rounds, but Mbili got hurt on 2 occasions early on. Whilst Gongora was on the back foot, he caught him with an uppercut, I think it was, that really rocked him. And then later on in the fight as well, it was another uppercut that really rocked him and, had Mbili, wobbling a little bit. And that was the first time in which we'd seen a little bit of maybe vulnerabilities in the chin of Mbili, and again, Gongora was able to expose that, whereas Gongora had a bit of success against Martinez, but nowhere near the same kind of level, and inevitably, really had to deal with a lot of like onslaughting pressure. And I feel like if it would have gone much further, I feel like his corner probably could have gotten involved and nobody would have really been disputing it, in Gongora's corner. But this fight, of course, is definitely an interesting fight. I think Martinez, carries his own very good level of power. I think he moves a bit better. I think he does, throw a bit more variety of punches and is a bit less tense. But Mbili is the come forward bullish guy who, is very hard to be able to get off and very hard to handle. And of course, Martinez hasn't faced anybody like Mbili yet. I do think that Mbili is going to win via unanimous decision. I think it is going to be a close fight, and it is, quite a difficult matchup to be able to call, really, because, again, I wouldn't be just brushing aside Lester Martinez. I think he is going to make it a very difficult contest, and I think the later the fight goes, the more tired Mbili is going to get, the more Martinez's power could play a factor, and again, we will have to see how good Mbili's chin really is for this fight. But I do think, again, the onslaught in pressure from the get-go, with the kind of in-pocket variety of short shot punches, which will of course come with a tremendous amount of strength and power, will, of course play a factor. And like I say, Martinez hasn't had to face anybody like that so far, and his defensive movement is better than that of Mbili's, but it's not circling off that well. He's not able to do that well. And of course, Mbili is going to be somebody who is going to be trying to come forward. So I do, like I say, feel like Mbili is going to be able to win a close, unanimous decision. Then who he goes on to fight, of course, maybe the main event winner. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe the loser of the main event, I don't know. Or, Bruno Soares, Lele Saggio, Diego Pacheco, Jaime Munguia. I don't know what's going on with Munguia at the moment, but Hamza Shiraz, plenty of names in which also could be floating around as well for the interim champion. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.